Assalamu alaikum, inshallah you're well guys. So today we're going to speak about competency-based questions, and these come up in interviews all the time, and they often start with tell me, describe a time, or give me an example of. So if you hear one of those opening lines, your brain should be thinking straight away there's a good chance that this is a competency-based question. Now these questions are popular because they're designed to test a particular skill or characteristic, and in early careers interviews, common skills tested include teamwork, communication, organization, time management, flexibility, and leadership. Those are just a few examples. So as an interviewer, if I wanted to test leadership, I might ask you a question along the lines of, tell me about a time you led a team. Or if I wanted to test teamwork, I might ask you, tell me about a time you worked as part of a team. What was your role and what did you achieve? One thing to be aware of with competency-based questions is that you can also be asked sub-questions. So when I asked the question, tell me about a time you worked as part of a team, the sub-questions were, what was your role and what did you achieve? And that's there to guide you, to tell you how your answer should be structured. Now, if you're asked multiple sub-questions, that may indicate there's a problem, that you're not directly answering the question that's being asked. Hence why the interview is following up with all of these different sub-questions to help guide you. So if you're in the middle of an answer and the interviewer is constantly asking you sub-questions, stop. That means you're not giving them the right answer and you need to change your approach. I also want to point out that it's possible for multiple competencies to be tested in one question. So when I used tell me about a time you led a team, the main competency I was testing was leadership, but that question also tests your team working skills as well. My first tip for you guys is do a search online of competency-based questions. You could easily find 30 to 40 examples from a simple Google search, and you want to go through them again and again and again until you're comfortable you can identify the skills that are being tested in each question. The good thing is that competency-based questions aren't the most difficult. It's very unlikely that you'll be asked a question in an interview which you could not have prepared for beforehand. Now, you may have heard about the STARR method when answering competency-based questions, and STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. There is also another R for reflection, which I keep an eye out for when I'm conducting interviews. So when answering competency-based questions, I strongly advise use the STAR method and nothing else. You may feel under pressure to be unique, you may want to try something different, but these aren't the questions to do that. Follow the STAR method, it's tried and tested, and most importantly, it works. And the reason it works is because the method helps structure your answer and deliver your answer in a clear and concise manner. So when using STAR, you follow each letter in order. You start off your answer by talking about the situation, provide an overview, then you talk about task, what needed to be done, then you talk about action, specifically what you did, and then you talk about results. What did you achieve as a group or as an individual as a result of the actions that you took? And then you also have reflection, which isn't compulsory, but it's the one I recommend, which is where you talk about what could have been done better. If you were to do that task again or the activity again, what could you have done better in that situation? The first part of your answer is situation, and context is key here. Sometimes what can happen is people forget situation and go straight into action. This is what I did, but it can confuse the interviewer. If you're going to talk about all these wonderful actions that you did and how you demonstrated all these great skills, but I don't even know anything about the situation, I have no context, I'm going to be focusing on that confusion rather than focusing on the rest of your answer. So let's take the question, tell me about a time you've worked as part of a team. And for that question, my situation could be that I was raising funds as part of a charity bake sale. Now that answer was very brief. Yes, I provided a situation, fine, but there was no context. Who was I raising funds for? Who was part of the team? Where was this charity bake sale held? As an interviewer, I'm going to have all of these questions in my head. That's why it's so important that you provide good context when you start your answer. Alternatively, a better example of situation could have been at university, I volunteered with other students and we were supporting a local charity raise funds for homeless people by holding bake sales at our different campuses. Next, you need to talk about tasks where you describe what needed to be completed. So using the same example again, you could say, as a group, we decided to raise £500 for the charity, which meant that we needed to sell 250 cakes and treats on the day. And the reason why we agreed on £500 was because that it meant that we could provide 50 winter jackets for men and women over the cold Christmas period. Now, I didn't need to mention the second part of that answer, but remember what I said at the beginning, guys, context is key. Then you talk about action, and you need to be selfish here, guys. The interviewer wants to hear what you did specifically. It's very easy to fall down on the teamwork example because you may say the team did this. The team did that. The interviewer doesn't want to hear that. They want to understand your role better. So you need to talk highly of your role and what you achieved. Again, as an example, I was responsible for managing the budget and buying the ingredients for the cake sale. And although it was important that the cakes and the treats tasted nice, it was more important that we raised as much money as possible for the charity. So I had an idea which I agreed with the team, where we underspent on the budget. We had a budget of £200, but we only spent £150 so that we could donate the remaining £50 to the charity. And I brought the team round to my way of thinking because I explained that we're not professional bakers. We don't need to prioritize quality over the main charitable goal. And equally at the same time, if things aren't perfect, people aren't going to care as much because we're raising funds for charity. We're not doing this for profit. On the day, I was responsible for setting up the table and labeling the ingredients, which was important because we didn't want to cause problems for people with dietary needs or allergies. So as someone with good attention to detail skills, I naturally volunteered for that task. As a team, I'd say we delegated well. We broke the day down into 1-hour tasks, which made everything much more manageable. And it also meant that everyone was free to attend their university lectures and any other activities they had planned for that day. There's a few things to note in the action part of my answer. Firstly, I mentioned 3 or 4 skills. I spoke about managing a budget. I spoke about informal influencing over my team. I spoke about attention to detail. I literally name dropped that in the answer. And then I also spoke a bit about delegation in general. Secondly, I wasn't the hero in this story, so I didn't speak about making 1,000 sales in an hour, nor was I the leader in this particular activity, and I did that deliberately to show that you don't need to have these amazing scenarios planned. The interviewer isn't expecting you to have solved world peace. Then you talk about result, and there's 2 sections within result. Firstly, you talk about the results of the overall task, and secondly, most importantly, you link how your actions contributed to that result. And that's where most people fall down. They talk about the result as an overall, but they don't talk about how they contributed to that result. On the day, the sales were good and the events were well managed. And I think that was in part due to the effective delegation that we had, but unfortunately we fell just short of the fundraising target. We'd raised £475, but the good thing was that we'd still managed to donate over £500 to a charity, and that was because I'd saved us £50 when we were purchasing the ingredients for the bake sale. And on a personal note, it was really good to hear that there were no complaints from customers, because that meant that I got the labeling of the ingredients spot on. So in that example, I referenced my impeccable labeling skills and also the fact that I'd saved £50 in the original budget, which meant that we donated overall more than £500 to a charity. Now, I mentioned a final R for reflection, which again, I want to stress you don't have to use, but if you wanted to, this is where you would speak about any learnings. And if you were to perform the task again, what could you have done better? So in hindsight, I felt that sales were slightly down because we could have better marketed the event. Yes, we did post on social media, but I felt that we didn't post as frequently amongst our own personal networks. If we held another bake sale, I'd definitely recommend to the team that we should post more frequently amongst our own personal networks, because that will help with constantly advertising, and it will make sure that people don't just simply forget about the events on the day. Now, that was a brief example, guys, and I just want to make clear there's nothing wrong with talking about what could have been done better, because in real life work, projects hardly ever go to plan. There's always learnings that you can take away. Now, before I go, guys, here's some quick fire tips to help you out. Firstly, make sure you have varied examples. Talk about school, university, sports, work, volunteering. Try and aim to have at least 5 different examples prepared, because it shows a well-rounded character. Secondly, with these examples, make sure that the answer is adaptable so that you can use the same scenario regardless of the question that's being asked. So if we were being asked about informal influencing, we can still use the charity bake sale example. Thirdly, drop skills in your answer, especially the ones that you're trying to highlight. I led a team, I communicated effectively, I organized my tasks. It just makes it super clear to the interviewer that you've answered the question's requirements. And finally, I say this all the time, but do your research. Look at the company's website, look at the job description, because you'll be able to find the key skills that are likely to be tested in the interview. Inshallah, I'll leave it there, guys. As always, any questions or queries, please feel free to comment below or message me on Instagram.